What is up,
Rookie Moves Nation? Oh, what?
Let me do it. What is up, Rookie Nation?
We are back with episode 2 of the Rookie Moves podcast, where we turn winning moves.
No, run it back.
Welcome back to the Rookie Moves podcast, where we turn rookie moves
into winning strategies.
Let's get it started.
Okay, so today we are joined by our esteemed guest, Mr. Ruan Coetzer. And fun fact, he's actually currently teaching at our school. He's my mentor at school, and he's spreading wisdom every single day to hundreds of students, potentially changing lives and changing the future, molding it into one where people understand language better. So please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you too. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here on your podcast. Yeah, so as Lucas said, I'm teaching at Bridgehouse School currently, Afrikaans and French. But it is language that has always been my interest, my main interest and passion in life. I love to share in everything that is linguistic and how language sort of penetrates and flows through so many aspects of our lives, our daily lives, things that we don't even recognize or notice. So it's a real honor to discuss that with you two today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And quick question, how have you become so wise at such a young age? You are late 20s at max. How have you become so...
How old are you?
We are not talking age, you know.
Age is just a number.
Age is, yeah, just revolutions around the sun.
Exactly.
I don't know so much about the wisdom part, but I mean my training or my main point where I found all of this intriguing information about language was at the University of Pretoria, which was my alma mater.
UP,
Ducks of Nux. And I started with a BA degree in law. Although I never actually wanted to do law, it was always the humanities subjects that always captured my attention. So there I took Afrikaans, my lievelingstaal, Afrikaans and French, along with philosophy, also something that we'll delve into later, and then a year of psychology. So those are like, you know, you want to take as much as you possibly can, but unfortunately we're a bit limited. So there was humanities subjects and then with my other law modules. And then after that, there was a choice of either like going into law, doing an LLB, or then doing an honours in Afrikaans, which is what I really wanted to do. And since at that point I couldn't really make my decision, I did both. So I enrolled concurrently in the LLB and honours. And yeah, but the kind of education that you get at the Afrikaans department at UP, it was this wonderful combination of like going into literature on the one hand, and we went like into detail in like Afrikaans poetry, prose, drama, and then the other half was like into linguistics. So we really like untangle not just how Afrikaans works particularly, but how language, you know, has these so many components, from the sound system to how words are formed in the sentences, then social aspects, like what's the link between sociology, identity and language. And then after that, you know, I finished both degrees. Eventually went on to do a master's in linguistics, which I finished last year, finally. And yeah, so I salute the lecturers at UP mainly for their knowledge and wisdom.
He's too humble to say it, but he finished as one of the top students and received an award for his amazing thesis and writing and just overall aura at Ducks. So we are with a very intellectual individual right now. So
sharing the spotlight with two other intellectuals.
Hopefully, but yeah, we'll see about that. We're like forever rookies. That's the whole point of this podcast.
Exactly.
But as you can see, us three are wearing the infamous black Huberman shirt, meaning there's some serious discussion going on today.
Very serious.
Specifically, we'll be talking, if you haven't guessed it yet, about the power of language and how you are always being molded by what people say to you, and how language can actually transform people's perception of you as an individual. So there's a lot of value to be dropped today. So I hope you guys are ready. Do you have anything to add, Herman?
Oh, just stay tuned, you know. It might be a little bit hard.
So, okay, I'm just curious. How are we today being persuaded through language in social media, in the news? What does that look like, and is it happening? Maybe people don't really realize what all these large corporates are doing to you on a daily basis in terms of news.
And to add on to that, how can we use this propaganda and these language terms to our benefit so we can use in our own social media posts, our own businesses, to convince people to do what we want them to do.
Exactly.
To put it simply.
So on the one hand, how can you apply it for yourself, like in persuasion? And on the other hand, how do you feel like or where do you see that you're being either persuaded or manipulated against your will? So there's like one of the classical texts on persuasion is a 2,000-year-old text. Lucas, he knows a bit about it. Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, wrote this book called The Art of Rhetoric. And
he's told our class in school about this already because it's just that good, you know. You got to spread that puppy.
So he's basically, a lot of what he said back then is still applicable today. And his like main idea had this triad sort of persuasion. And if I can remember now correctly, it's logos, ethos, and pathos. So that's like one of the classical models of persuasion. The ethos part is referring to somebody's reputation. So either like a company or a politician, a scientist, you know, if you listen to someone like, you know, Huberman, he's got a lot of ethos, meaning like he's a person with reputation, he's well respected, and because of your reputation, that actually grants you a lot of, let's say, credibility or weight to what they say. So they tend to be more convincing just by the fact that they are actually already highly seen and they've got like quite an extensive reputation. Well established. Yeah. So that's the ethos part. And then the pathos, or first start with the logos. The logos is actually the how well your sentence or your argument is constructed. So is there some kind of logical, linear speech or argument that you're providing? Is it scattered? Is it all over the place? Or do you see that there's an actual arguments that are leading to a conclusion and that you can clearly see that the one flows from the other? So if it's all scattered everywhere, then you're not gonna get much. But if the argument makes sense, if it has some
logically
kind of
sound, has that foundation ground.
You know the classical thing that's called a syllogism. You know, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore he is mortal. So it's very clearly that one flows into the other.
Yeah.
But that's actually not so widely used, especially in politics, because it's pathos, the third one, that almost carries the most value. And for most people.
In terms of perception.
In terms of what influences people. So the pathos is actually feelings. It's emotion. So ideally you can combine the three, but if you appeal to someone's emotion, like let's say you're a politician like, Trump, and then he knows, okay, what's my sort of how will I convince people of my stance? Then they target things that people feel very strongly about. Immigration, people go up in arms about it. So let me focus on that aspect. The family life, if he does a speech and he's like, think of your children, think of your, bringing it back to things that lie very close to your heart, and they know their audience. So that's the kind of first thing that you need to look for persuasion. Can you combine those three? So and for your own thinking and for your own, persuasion, see how you can like link those three up.
With emotion, appealing to people's emotions being the main one.
Yeah, so that's the first triad, and then there are like these subcategories or like not skills but techniques that you can use. And I've also something that we've spoken about, I've sort of tried in class, things like having a snappy
hook.
Snappy hook, a line that you throw out, I'm loving it. Or, today, tomorrow, together. Oh, there's some nice alliteration. And the thing is, like, if something is snappy, it's not just snappy because, oh, it's fun to say. It's because it's hooked in your memory. So making something, using either alliteration or rhyme or, assonance,
Right.
some kind of repetition that just sticks.
Yeah.
Then people remember that brand, that logo for the next time. So like snappy line is one of the techniques. Repetition, the more times you see something, the more times you hear it, that also...
That's powerful for things like brand.
Yeah,
Brandity.
yeah, exactly. And in the advertising, the more times you see the ad, the more times it gets
And then
lodged
it conveys that feeling of trust when you've seen that logo before. So it's not unfamiliar. So you feel like, okay, I know these guys. And then subconsciously you trust them more and you're more willing to listen to the advertising. Just fall for that. Well, I say fall for, but now like get persuaded,
Because the falling for it is true because what's that? Familiarity.
Exactly.
And the more familiar you become with something, it's shown the best way to either get to know someone or grow closer is to see them more often. So familiarity builds this kind of bond or builds this kind of trust.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's one aspect. There's a familiarity that's created with it. Associations, even if you just look at advertising generally, why do they pick an actor or a celebrity to wear a certain brand? Because there's this, if you buy this, if you drink this, and if you drink that, you'll be like this person, or you'll be like that person.
Like Jordans, If you put on a pair of Jordans, you think you're going to play like Michael Jordan. It's a subconscious thing. So people look up to these icons and they think, okay, if they're wearing this product and I want to be like them, then the way I can become Michael Jordan is by wearing this shoe, or at least become closer to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really how you can drive people to buy a certain product. So we're linking this back to the business world now.
That's one way, yeah.
That's why I think in the modern times, creating your personal brand and personal identity online is so important, because you get to play off this. The character you build can influence people to buy certain products, and people pay big money for that.
Yeah.
Big corporations, they want people with this aura, with this personality, with this indistinct characteristic that they know, okay, that is what my company needs. His people that like him are the ones I want to buy my products. And it's such an effective tool to get people to buy something. That's why all these big corporations spend gabajillions
Because
on
it's deeply
influencers.
personal.
Exactly. And that's someone that you love, you look up to, that you would literally do anything for. Some people. They really, for example, in I think it was 2010 times Justin Bieber, for example. He was creme de la creme. Whichever company that worked with him would just get tons of customers, because people really loved him, wanted to be associated with him, and that just made it so that when they bought the products, it felt like they were buying into him and getting
one
a piece
step
of him.
closer
It's
to becoming-
piggybacking on their reputation, because it's literally linking up two different people, components or companies or brands, and then via association their reputation sort of intermingles.
Exactly, and that's why we're wearing these black shirts, because we know Huberman wears black shirts.
So we
want to play off his reputation.
He's got a good podcast. We
Exactly.
want a good podcast. How do we do that? Black shirts. There we go.
Yeah, and subconsciously for the people watching this, it's triggering. And
You trust us more
you
right
trust
now.
us more,
Don't
exactly.
lie.
So buy our product.
Yeah, no, exactly. So this reputation that you can, cling on.
Exactly.
Then there's quite a few of these techniques. We can go back to them in terms of the language part. Now this is really interesting about how politicians or advertisements sort of, if there's this idea of framing. Now that's also a very common thing that we've used. How do you frame a certain scenario? How do we frame a debate? But it's actually such a intrinsic part of how language works. Just as an example of how framing is used, I don't know if you can think of something on the fly, but one of them would be, so if there's even in naming, the US apparently had a Department of War, which I think in the 1920s or early 20th century, and it was very clear what they wanted to. Okay, there's a Department of War, so this is what we're doing. We're waging war. But then it was changed into a Department of Defense, giving this idea that, actually it's not about war, we're just defending each other. So it's reconceptualized, the same thing that they do, but they're still waging war. It can be, Trump has this the way of speaking about immigrants. For example, when he would say, there's a new wave of immigrants coming in, or like they're flooding the country.
Yeah, us versus them. It's the nuance of the words, like flood.
Flood, flow, they're flooding in, there's a wave of them.
It's like you can't stop it, it's a negative connotation to that.
And what do those three words have in common? Like if you just think of flood, wave, overflowing, like...
So like
drowning.
Water-related drowning,
Water.
It's like you can't handle it.
Yeah, so it's like framing it, it's using the idea of like a natural disaster caused by water.
Exactly.
And because he uses it without people knowing, like it's subconsciously, it frames their way of thinking of what immigrants are. So they are like these natural disasters. He didn't say they're a natural disaster, but he's using these words, and that subconsciously...
Nuance, it subconsciously changes their perception of what immigrants should be. And that it's so important, or humans are so susceptible to it, because we're constantly trying to figure out, like, who can we trust? For survival purposes, like, I think language and trust and communication are so interlinked. So people are constantly trying to think, okay, who can we trust? Who's the enemy? That's why Trump loves this tactic of us versus them. I'm not taking a stance against Trump, but he is good at persuading people into following his way of thinking. And so that us versus them mentality is very effective at bringing America together and then othering everyone else, because it is better for their economy as well in many ways. It could worsen over time, but that's besides the point. So that's a
really, like, the whole us versus them dynamic is really interesting, because it is what makes it so effective is that it has this identity component to it. So already you're creating, like Trump, let's say his supporters now, but you're creating an us. So either you're part of us or like you're against us. So it's an us and them scenario. And then people sort of, it's almost enforcing a category that's not actually there. So it's creating a category, but the whole nature of that category is that it's binary. So, and that's the simplest way to formulate anything. It's so simple, which makes it so effective.
Exactly, yeah. And it's like, it justifies these cruel acts that they can take. That's why they can convince people to go to war. Because, like, we aren't them. They're not like us. Yeah. So it's kind of like, in a weird way, you kind of forget that they're human. And they just become this beast that you need. That's why, like, when you fish, for example, you don't mind killing 50 fish because they're them. You think that they're less than you. I think that's what that us versus them thing also creates. I think even linking back to the changing it from war to defense, like, you're way more likely to go attack someone if they attacked you first. It's just human nature.
Or if you think they attacked you,
exactly.
even if they didn't.
You create an enemy framework, that they need to
as
be
if
attacked.
They've started it to justify the cruel acts that you're about to commit.
And it's like, in the UK, I know they refer to their country kind of like their lady. So it's like they have to go protect their lady. And that's what this defense is. It's not that they're going to go attack someone. It's that they're just defending what's theirs. And that they need to defend for whoever's at home, like you were saying, linking it to their children, to their people, to their homes. Like,
which justifies everything.
Exactly.
As long as you can justify to people that the act that they're going to commit, or that you want them to commit, is the right thing to do, that's the key. And that's done by appealing to their instincts and their emotions, If you link it to their family, their loved ones, I mean, people will do almost anything to protect that.
Yeah, and it stops, like, the craziest thing for me is, like, Stalin said this, like, one person dying is a crisis, but 1,000 people dying is just a statistic. Like, I don't know if that's exactly the quote.
It's too far removed.
Exactly.
But exactly, like, killing one person is, like, this crazy thing. But when you're out there in war, shooting 50 people, it's kind of justified.
Video game.
Exactly, no. And it's justified because it's like, okay, they're not like me, so it's fine if I kill them, because I need to kill them to protect the people that are waiting for me at home, my wife, my children, these people that are so close to home.
And in terms of persuasion, there's actually like I can't remember the exact speech, but apparently like Julius Caesar was one of the, first people to use this idea of identity in a speech of persuasion. So they were going into war. I can't remember who exactly they were going to wage against, but then he used this idea of, it's not just the us and the them, but he would instill an identity in the soldiers, like the warriors themselves. So you are the kind of people that will protect your wives and your children, or your husband, whoever, your family. You are the kind of people that will. So you form an identity sort of for them, one that's like very prestigious. And then the others who are not fighting, they are the kind of people who, would just stay at home and watch your village being plundered. And then the other component is like with the us and them is that there's like a psychological bias that the in-group, like the us, is always good. Or like they are like a higher moral character. So you intrinsically, who you associate with is normally the people who are doing things right at the moment. And the them, they are the others.
Exactly.
You even give them names. There's always been like, animalistic names. They've used cockroaches at some times. That's another technique, is like to dehumanize. So give them a label, give them a name of something that's like disgusting or vulgar in some sense. And that becomes a sort of naturalized way of referring to the them people.
Yeah.
So every time you use something like cockroach, every time you use something like, just think of an example now from it. The cockroach was used, I just can't remember now on who it was used against, but then it becomes a common way of referring to a them.
And like this tactic that we're talking about now, it works. And it's been proven, like, just for example, like everyone talks about how horrific the Nazis were, and they really were horrific.
Yeah.
But I mean, Hitler was able to convince a whole country that these people have to be destroyed, otherwise they're going to get attacked. And it's the same with this Julius thing. They created in their propaganda two different personas. So the white Aryan Germans, they were great, they were better, they were this higher power. Whereas Jewish, they give them these bestial names, these cockroaches, they just want to take your money. Like they really created a character for like the Jewish people and just bunched them all in this character. And it just made it way more justified in the Nazis' minds to kill these people, because they became like a pest, like a cockroach. And like, it's normal for us humans to just go, oh, I see a cockroach, let me go kill it. And it became this same kind of link.
Let's just go kill it.
Exactly, let's just go kill it, because the cockroach didn't really bite me, it didn't hurt me, but it's there and it's disgusting, so I have to kill it.
It's interesting that you say character, because that's exactly how it is to a human. It's, if you want to appeal to their emotions, a story is one of the easiest ways. So if they're an antagonist in this story of you and your rightful possessions and family and everything, everything that your life is, or what they want you to think you deserve, if you're able to give them this identity and then give the other character this antagonistic identity, then it's easy for them to just block everything else out and then just do the action that you wanted them to do. But I think it's important that you can't just do it in one hit. You have to, it's sort of
gradual.
Like 1,000 paper cuts, nuance in each word, how you describe them.
Exactly.
That's a very, because it is actually, and if you could look at it, there's a sort of a pyramid, but at least a hierarchical way that you can organize it, because at a much higher end that you've got the level of narrative, and narratives go into ideologies, which then go into worldviews. If you want to trace it all the way down, and maybe later we can sort of funnel our way up, is that like if you look at language again, because language is the basis of how we construct narratives and how we construct ideologies. But like if you think of, so at the lowest end you've got phonemes, which are just like individual sounds. Exactly. So it's phonemes at the very base level. Then from phonemes, you combine them, then you form words or parts of words. So that's morphology. So from sounds towards morphology. Then you start combining words together and they form phrases. Right. And then phrases can then expand into sentences, which then becomes, I think the next level would then be called like a discourse. like a conversation or one line of thinking, one of my speech turns that I take. It can be one discourse. In conversations, it's interesting because everyone builds on it. But so you've got the sentence level, then you've got the discourse level. And then discourses, to trace back to words, they also are tied to concepts, but like even word meaning, word understanding, the meaning behind words is a very intricate sort of web of associations. Words themselves are placed within like what's called the lexical field. And I think you've heard this before. You're like, associated words that are grouped together because they share some kind of similarity with one another. So, for example, like furniture, those words, like you can think of examples: furniture, a table, a chair, a couch. Some of them are very prototypical, table and chair being one of them. And then less prototypical would then be something like maybe a desk or what's something a bit more table lamp. So like a desk table.
Yeah.
They're not so prototypical, but they do have associations with each other.
Or like a throne.
Yeah, or like a throne, exactly like a throne. And we know this because of like many sort of experiments that have been done on it. If you list, like you say 2 or 3 furniture words, the speed at which you'll recall something, throne is a bit more atypical, but then you'll quickly trigger something like, a sofa or an armchair. So they and it's very difficult to sort of really pinpoint this in the brain, but we know because of the speed at which it's recalled that they share associations with each other. You can have a vehicle, lexical field. A school is an entire field. Like if you think of student, you think of teacher, you think of buildings. And then these desk again, but see, that's where they start interlinking.
That's the nuance of the lexical field.
Because they share. These are also not like very tightly delineated categories. They do, it's called a fuzzy continuum. So they do start overlapping with each other. But then these lexical fields then also become frames, frames and scripts. So a frame would be a very popular example that's used as sort of like the restaurant frame. Okay, so if you say restaurant, what are the words that come to mind immediately? Like
dinner,
food,
steak,
table,
wine,
family,
Zamalek.
Zamalek. Exactly.
Throw up a picture of a Zamalek.
So those are, and some of them, and that's interesting because using Zamalek reveals, so the first layer was sort of like very generalized overlapping associations within a particular linguistic community or like speakers of a language or within a culture. But then you've got the personalized ones. So you've got a personal association with Zamalek that maybe some people can.
If you guys don't know, Zamalek, here's a picture of what a Zamalek is. It's not the actual name, it's called a black label. It's a beer that's very popular amongst South Africans, has a long history in South African heritage, and it's just like, I don't know, you kind of associate Zamalek with good vibes, partying, that type of thing.
And that you can use in advertisement because then you associate.
I was about to say, how can we maybe use these lexical fields that you're saying in business to sell another product? It's like when you buy a burger, you want to get fries as well, even if you have to pay that extra cost. Cause like
they just come together.
Like it is a package deal. For example, when you buy a table, you're gonna have to buy a chair as well.
Complementary goods.
Because it has to be. How can we use these lexical fields to get people to buy things that maybe they don't really need, but that's where we make our money? Because that's usually how it is in businesses. The main product is not really where businesses make the big money, but it's in the little extra, like the ones you don't really think about, the ones that you're kind of guaranteed to buy. That's where they make
that's another
larger
tactic
markups.
Where it's like, printers are cheap, but you make printer ink expensive.
Exactly.
That's another. Those are all like just like sales techniques, right?
Yeah, some of the techniques that you can sort of use there. I think maybe we can go back to them. The frame then is like, so there's a certain culturally instilled expectations. Like at a restaurant, what do you expect? You expect,
bring out the wine menu. Sir, what would you like? Without you even asking.
You walk in there, you don't even think about it, but you know that you'll probably be seated. They'll be either say, please wait to be seated. You'll be put at a table. You'll bring the menu. But you've got these roles. So even in frames, you've got these, I mean, they're called cognitive entities, but so you've got role players within them. So like at a restaurant frame, there's a role player called a waiter. you play a role as the customer, and then there's a certain sequence of events that reoccur. And this has been laid down, like, you know, from experience.
Yeah.
This is at maybe a higher level of like abstraction, but concepts themselves, I don't want to be jumping around too much, but even concepts themselves arise they arise from experience. Like even the thing, like the idea of like increase or decrease, which is actually abstract if you think about it. Like there are more books here and less books there, but the idea of increase, let's say if you look at a chart, the prices have risen, right? But no, where's the price? It doesn't rise. What do you mean it rose? What do you mean it's increased? Because price is like an abstract thing. But you blend this idea that you've got this experience that the more you put, like, stack things on top of each other, so you made this association that more is up, right? Or more, like, it increases. So then you take that physical experience and you map it onto something like price.
So
which
it's
is
easier to
abstract.
understand.
And not just easy to understand, it is like one of the fundamental ways to understand it. Like you mentioned earlier that, you know, we think a lot of in terms of narratives, but also like in terms of these metaphors. You can't help it. It's part of like your neural architecture that you use these abstract concepts. Back to like the idea of frames. So you've got like something like the restaurant frame. Now, and beyond that, you'll go into something like ideologies, but we'll get there later. But just thinking of this idea of the restaurant frame, now you can frame basically any sort of scenario concept in terms of these almost pre-constructed,
like preconceived notions and cultures of like what's expected.
What to expect. So now, like
if a waiter goes up to you and says, "Hey, what's up, fatty?" You can be like walking out of this restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not expected of you. Like, why are you not calling me sir?
Defying norms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like breaking your trust. You know, you've developed what is this idea of what is normal because it like relates to trust and survival instincts, right? So if people are deviating from what's normal, you know, that's gonna trigger those alarms in your brain that think, okay, this isn't normal. Okay, let me just be a little bit more alert. You know, like you're just going to be a bit more on edge.
So do you guys think then that people must stick to this to convince people? So they must stick to what their preconceived notion of what's going to happen. They must keep doing that. Do you get what I mean? Like
that's important to understand, like especially in your target market in the business.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, would you rather give a unique experience, like calling your people fatty? For example, this restaurant where they like smack you on the bum if you don't finish your food. Just like as an example, you know?
Yeah.
Like they're making a lot of money because they went against the norm. That's not what when you sit down in a restaurant, you don't get your bum smacked because you don't finish. They say, "It's okay, sir, was the food okay?" Like going against that, is that better or worse in a business sense? Or just a psychology sense? Like, would people rather have their preconceived notions be correct or be shocked with this new thing that happened that they didn't expect? Would that maybe stick in their mind better?
You got to balance it.
But there is that element of novelty with it.
Yeah.
I mean, you get in the US, there's some ridiculous markets, but I don't know if you've seen the Karen restaurant, for example.
What is that?
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you know.
Karen.
Karen restaurant is the one that I think of, and this heart attack.
Heart attack.
Yeah, exactly.
Heart attack roll.
Quadruple.
That one's
bypass
crazy,
burger. Yeah.
So like the Karen restaurant is like you go in, and then there'd be like this proper Karen like greeting you, not even like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And then they throw the menu on the
very disrespectful.
Yeah, defying like what we'd consider, but people go there for like the experience.
Exactly, because
something novel. Yeah. So
and people want unique things. That's why I'm thinking, like, would it be better or worse to give them these unique things? Because they're gonna remember it, but realistically, you're not going to the Karen restaurant. Like, you're not gonna have a loyal customer at the Karen restaurants. It's more like these one-off novelties.
So the lifetime value of the customer
is
might
way
be lower.
less. Exactly.
Yeah, what do they call it? Like not like a prototype. Yeah, there's a recurring client, but it's almost like a little novelty, product.
Differentiation of product.
Yeah, it's like as you say, like it's almost like a disposable experience.
Right,
you do it once off.
Exactly.
But if you're like in a place where there'd be a lot more like walk-ins and just like once off, then maybe that can work.
it depends on things like, foot traffic, how many people are walking past. Like, for those once-offs, you can have like quite a remote location because people will come to you because they've heard about you because you're so novel. But, in a place like a busy mall, you don't want some crazy novel restaurant. You want a place that can get the job done because the volume is just like, the sheer volume is, people want something consistent that can consistently meet expectations.
And I think exactly, it's like that. It's like, it all depends on what they're expecting. When you go to a fast food restaurant, you don't expect them to call you sir and smack you on the bum.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? Like, you expect
People go to McDonald's
food quickly that tastes pretty consistently okay. Do you get it? Like, and it also depends on where you are. Like, a fancy restaurant normally wouldn't be placed in a mall because that's not that link in your mind. You get it? Like, when you go to a fancy restaurant, you want a unique experience tailored to you, where they greet you, hello sir, give you a nice wine list and a good experience, but it's going to take a bit of time.
Yeah,
And that's why you don't see them in the malls, because in the malls, people want quick food that's consistent.
And
Usually.
it links to your brand as well. Like when people see McDonald's, they think, okay, consistently decent food. Okay,
That's cheap.
Yeah,
And that's easy, affordable.
That's usually cheap. So I think in terms of language and speeches and keeping it interesting, when someone just gives some default ChatGPT response, it's kind of like you just switch off. It doesn't really appeal to you. Your brain is sort of closed off. But like I was talking about, like novelty, like, switches the brain on, like alarms. When you use a different word or some assonance or something like that.
A new kind of association as well. Like there's that element of novelty. Like you're bringing two ideas that didn't exist before. Now you bring them together. Like now you've got the experience of Karen, you've got the experience of a restaurant, you blend them together and this is what you get.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they try it with any like themed place. You've got Spur in South Africa. There's no history of Indians in South Africa, but now you're blending like these two spaces together, and what you're selling is almost I almost want to say it's like a little Disney-fied version. You like living in a particular in a particular frame.
Exactly.
So, and then if you can dress up in a certain way, like this place close to Kruger's for Greensleeves, where the theme is like medieval, and then you come dressed as like either king or queen or like peasant. Then they've blended like those two spaces together, and you don't often like see something like that
because it's that novelty. People want something that's different. We're not in medieval times. We're not in like past Indian time, but people still want to experience that because they want something new. It's the reason why people travel as well. They want to see something new that's out of the
and they want to
current...
be like in the movies,
Exactly.
The movies has changed their perception of what cool is, and that's
which
like
links
why
back to
culture.
Propaganda and the people that they relate themselves with.
Exactly.
There's even I don't know if you've been to like a fine dining experience, though the way the chef explains what's coming. I mean, that was the more senses, that's also like another part of persuasion or actually just captivating speech in general, is like the more senses, the more sensory kind of words that you use related to taste, related to sound, to sight, because as you say them, like the way that your brain literally came to understand, like linguistically or conceptually, what these words mean, is that it activates memory. It's a memory association. So if it's something sensory, like you're saying, it was like this vivid, fiery spice or what? Fiery. Imagine now you're blending. I mean, even saying that a taste is fiery, you're blending already a few concepts together.
Right.
But that really hooks people in because they've got these heightened association and co-activation of not just one part. The more abstract you speak, I mean, people who like thinking and speaking abstractly would be able to follow you. But most of the time, bringing it back to a very concrete, physical experience is what captures people, because then they can relate to it on a much more fundamental level.
Sensory way.
Way.
We're simple creatures. We experience things in the immediate realm, but the thing about humans is that we're able to take those immediate senses and understand them at higher levels of abstraction. We're able to see little blotches of ink on a page and understand words from that. and then eventually, like we were just saying, form sentences, paragraphs, and then novels, and then Shakespearean stories, and all of that, right?
From these very fundamental sort of building blocks. But
Exactly.
It all builds up from there, just the immediate world. A dog can't it can see the black on the pages, but can it understand it? That's different.
Because it doesn't. One argument doesn't have language to construct it and put it in a very linear, concrete way. Because in essence, what language is, it's a system of representation. Like
Right.
you've got the external world, you've got events, you've got things happening. There's just phenomena. If there's phenomena happening and occurring, and it'd be interesting to think, like, what is it like for... I mean, there's this very famous essay by... It wasn't Bertrand Russell. Who was it? It's called What's It Like to Be a Bat? It's a famous essay in philosophy of mind, because he then asks the question, there's something, what it's like to be a bat. In other words, like, we're used to experiencing the world with a human body. We've got 2 hands, we've got legs, we've got 2 ears, a nose. Our body is shaped in a particular way, and that has consequences for, like, interaction with it. Now, a bat has something like echolocation. Can you imagine what it's like to have echolocation and to navigate your world like that? And the same with, like, a snake, it uses sensors in its tongue to pick up, like, the environment. But we can't imagine what it's like for that, to experience the world like that. Exactly. And now we've got this thing, language. We're forming a way of grasping the world by labeling, by organizing it in these...
Uniquely human descriptions.
Yeah, so, like, a verb. To many animals, things just happen. But now there's just phenomena. But we say, no, there's not just phenomena. There's actually events. There's running. There's falling. There's rain. You actually hook. You put like a little hook onto reality and say, there is this thing. And the same with nouns. They are objects. And they are individualized. Right. We've got adjectives. We've got descriptions. We can label them to organize it for us. I mean, that's one of the 2 functions of language. Is the first one is that it's an organizing tool. So it's putting a vast amount of experiences, thoughts that you have, and it gives you a way to just put it in a coherent, orderly way. So the world makes more sense for you. It's not just things happening.
Exactly.
And then you can communicate that. Now, that's the other sort of central aspect to it. If you imagine, like, people, the world, if we didn't have language, the cooperation would just, like, completely fall apart. Like, to what extent can you cooperate with somebody, especially, like, on a large scale, if you can't use words to plan, to work together on a project, to build a society, to build a civilization? It's like...
And that's why you can't understand babies. They can't tell you what they're thinking, what they're saying. Like, they just cannot do it. That's why it's so hard to link that, like, just to speak to. Like, you can't really connect to them when they're really young, because you can't really tell, other than the emotions that they give you, which is crying, laughter. It's very basic, like, what's it called, top level emotions.
Yeah.
And there's even argument to say, like, if you can't communicate effectively as a human, that it might even make you less human, because that means you're not able to convey nuance, tell stories, have logic, right? Language and logic are very interlinked, right?
And that's why we're why we've been able to advance as a species. That's like one of the main catalysts of our consistent improval and innovation.
You can pass things on. You don't have to relive every experience again. You can pass it on through language, through generation,
through writing,
and compound, right? It's a compounding game.
Yeah, that's exactly, like, that's why before writing, I mean, writing is a relatively recent event, about 5,000 years. I mean, humans, modern Homo sapiens is about like 200,000 years, but depending on where you want to put the boundaries, draw the line, put the boundaries. And the primary way that information was passed on through generations was